Tyra Benoit, Thyra Benoit. This is part one of my story. I was born in Washington in the great year of 1950. However, due to family difficulties, my parents divorced and I moved to Watertown, Massachusetts. Some of you may know Watertown as it is the home of the Perkins School for the Blind and the Deaf. It wasn't until I started college in 1968 that I realized that people don't cross streets with bells. Can you imagine what it was like going to school in Boston? I attended Simmons College, and trying to cross the street with red and yellow lights flashing at the same time and hearing no bells and almost getting hit by a car. Well, anyway, that was my big adventure about going to school in Boston. At Simmons College, I started as a nursing physical therapy major, but I decided that if I wanted to graduate on time, I would be better off majoring in something else. So I chose French. I like languages and I like to mimic people. In any case, then I had to decide what to do. I thought, well, maybe I would major in French and then go on and become a social worker. But first I had to get through college, so I also took education classes. And I had the pleasure of teaching on the high school level at an experimental school. Can you imagine what it's like to be in a classroom with students being permitted to literally hang out of the window? Well, that was acceptable. I got through the year, and then I left Boston and came to Washington, D.C., where I attended Howard University School of Social Work. I was in an experimental class, and it seems like all of my academic years have been filled with experiments or first-timers. When I started school in Boston, they did away with grades. And I don't know if any of you have had that experience, but it permits you to be very focused on what interests you, where you could give your talents, and on the mandatory subjects which don't necessarily meet your academic needs, you can get by. Well, anyway, Simmons was wonderful. I came to Howard and then learned I was in a new thrust class. And that meant we went straight through a 2-year program. We finished in a year and a half with no grades again. So I'm here in Washington and I'm here to stay. And I thoroughly enjoyed my experience at Howard. It is where I met Dr. Marquessa Brown, and it is through my friendship with her that I stand before you today. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Leslie Rock, and I'm going to talk today about how to make California rolls. First of all, you should assemble your ingredients because you can get kind of caught up in all the details of this recipe. You need rice, and you don't have to have Japanese sticky rice, although it's nice, but you could use any kind of rice except for the American converted or minute rice or something like that. Those don't work out so well. And I usually cook my rice in a rice cooker, but we'll talk about that later. So you need rice, and you need rice vinegar, and you need nori. Those are sheets of seaweed that you'll use to roll up the rolls in. And usually you want to use artificial crab or real crab and avocado or ripe avocado. And for the inside parts, you can put almost anything. You can use cooked carrots or even scrambled egg. So the first thing you do is you put your rice on, and you just follow the recipe for the cooking instructions for the rice. And at the last minute, when the rice is almost done, you put in about a cup of that rice vinegar. And so it'll end up being sticky and have a little more flavor than regular rice. And you get your sheets of nori, and you can roll this out on a bamboo roller, although you don't need to get so fancy. You could just do it with your bare hands on a cutting board, something like that. So you put the rice just a little bit in the middle of these sheets of nori in a long strip, and then you can put your fake crab sliced into like a julienne, and same with the avocado, and you can use your cooked carrots and put those in the center, and then you roll it up. And it sticks together itself, but at the very end you should take a little bit of water on your finger and just put that on the seam of the rolled up nori so that it'll stick a little better. And then leave them rolled up. Don't cut them right away. So you want to get all of your rolls assembled and put together, and then just before serving, you get a knife with a rather sharp knife, not with serrated edge. It works better when you have a sharp edge, but not a serrated edge. And put some water on the blade so you get a smooth cut, and then you cut the rolls up, and you'll end up with little California rolls, and they're a big hit at parties, especially football parties and whatnot, when you mostly have people bringing chips and dip, and then you bring these California rolls, and they're a huge hit. Although the kids don't like them much, especially when you serve them with wasabi, which is quite hot, but really tasty. So next time you have a party to go to, make California rolls for your friends.
Hi, my name is Bobby Jordan. Today, we're going to take a look at the early years of William Shakespeare. Now, the information that I'm going to give you is in your textbook. You have two textbooks for this course, and the first one is Shakespeare of London by Marchette Chute. That's spelled C-H-U-T-E. The other textbook is called Shakespeare Alive, and that is edited by Joseph Patt. If we really want to understand the man, though, we have to look at the humble beginnings of his father. We've got to look at the town that he came from. You don't understand why he has such a good grasp on the common man, the porter in a play like Macbeth, until you know about Stratford and what it was like to live there in the years circa about 1550. We want to take a look first then at John Shakespeare, William's father. John was the son of a tenant farmer. His brother was a tenant farmer. It didn't take young John very long to realize that if you farmed someone else's land, you were not going to make a very good living. John had bigger ambitions. Lucky for him that he lived next to a market town called Stratford. Now, I know we're talking about 1550, but the important thing is, in terms of rural England, these were still medieval towns. They hadn't moved into, quote, the Elizabethan era. So when we think about Stratford, it's a very small town, and yet it had something really important for a man like John Shakespeare. It had a middle class. Generally, throughout England, you were either very poor or very rich. But if you could sell goods and make money at it, then you were not poor. Then you had a good living. Then you belonged to a union. Then you could get married and raise a good family. And that's what John Shakespeare was after. So he moved into Stratford. He took a look around and he said, what people need that I can supply? And what they needed was gloves. Now in modern times that would be ridiculous. We don't wear gloves very much, especially in the western states, and especially here in California. But in England, think about it. A person didn't go outside to go to work without gloves on. It would be, the parallel today would be if I were going to go to an office and I didn't wear hose, or if a man was going to go to work in a bank and he didn't have a tie on. Gloves were a commodity that everybody needed and everybody wore. So if you wanted to make money, you wanted to make something that everybody would buy. John not only was a glover, and a very good one, he was known as a, quote, white glover. That means he made gloves out of the finest lambskin, and they were white as snow. So very rich people began to buy John Shakespeare's gloves. You would think that'd be enough for him, but it wasn't. Because he knew he could make a good business, and he did, and he bought 2 houses in the middle of Stratford, and then he decided he better go into politics. Because he was a common man, there was no way he was going to gain glory unless he went into politics. He first became an ale taster.
Go ahead and stop and save that.